Guys, welcome back to another video in this channel. Did you like our special video yesterday? If you haven't seen it, we are giving away, or not giving away, but we're offering a 90% discount to all of our courses. It's a little Christmas gift from the Next2 team to you guys. So if you want to check any of the courses that we've released in the last couple of months, except for the last one that we just released this last week, which, by the way, at the time of this video, should also have its 90% discount off, make sure to check the Udemy link down here. You can get all of the courses for a 90% discount. So, or a 90% code discount. So let's go now to the little character that we have here. I actually closed Maya. Today we're going to take a look at one of the last parts of the process, and it is complex, but I'm going to keep it super simple. We're just going to add a couple of interesting things here and there to have a nice control rig. The control rig are the curves that allow us to control the puppet, the digital puppet, which in this case is our rig. However, one of the things about the rigs is that you can make them as complex or as easy as you want. And that will, of course, depend on how much time you want to spend on that. In our case, we're going to keep it really simple. Let's go to Untone Map. There we go. And if we do a quick check, you can see that all of our elements are working perfectly fine. So what's the deal with the control rig? How does this work? How does the control rig work? Well, what we want is we want to be able to quickly select the joints and modify them, animate them using our traditional like keyframe animation, like you know when we have any object here inside of Maya. If you press the letter S, for some reason my letter S is not working. That's really weird. Is it my letter S? No, the S is working. For some reason, the shortcut here is not working. Remember, when this happens, you just like have to reinitialize Maya. I'm not gonna do it right now because it's not really worth it. But anyway, when you just go here and you key select it, you can just create a keyframe and then move it around. The problem is joints are difficult to select, especially if you have joints that are really like inside of the character. So the way we normally do this is by creating control curves. And there is a process that we use to create these control curves. And it's pretty much just going over here to curves and just creating a curve. These curves are really cool because they don't show up at render time. You don't export this to the engines, but you can still animate. And whatever you animate on this curve will be transferred to the joint that you want to animate. So for instance, I'm going to create this curve, which is going to be my main control or the root control. I'm going to call this a root_control. And I'm going to freeze the transformations. I'm actually going to create there we go. So freeze transformation. So this is set at 0. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a parent constraint. We're going to be using constraints a lot. A parent constraint is an indirect connection that you can get from one point to the other. Again, if you want to delve a little bit deeper, make use of the code and go get the rigging course. I explain all of these things like step by step, so it's a lot easier to follow. So you select this guy and then you select the root control, and we're going to use a parent constraint. What this parent constraint does, as you can see right here, it will connect the translation and the rotation of the element with 100% weight. And I hit apply. What happens now, you can see the curve is completely clean, but the root joint has this blue color, which means that it has a constrained connection. And now if I were to select this curve and move it around or rotate around, that rotation and that movement that I'm applying to this curve is being applied to that bone. And since the bone is connected to all of the other bones and all of the skin and everything, it just transfers along, right? It's like it inherits all of those transformations. Now, that's the first one, easy one, I would say. Let's do another one. Let's do one for the main body. So I'm going to create another curve, but here's where things are going to start getting a little bit trickier, because if you remember, this joint right here, well, actually that one had the exact same like rotations, but I want to make sure that whenever I create a curve, sorry, that curve has the exact same rotation with the local rotation axis as the joint that I'm going to. So there's a trick that we're going to be doing. We're going to create a curve. We're going to group the curve, and then we're going to select the joint that we want. It's called the driver. We're going to select the group. It's called the driven. And we're going to go to constraint, and we're going to do a parent constraint. Okay. But the interesting thing here is we're going to do a parent constraint without maintain offset. When we keep maintain offset, the distance between the two objects is kept. But when we don't do that and we apply, as you can see now, the curve has jumped to the center of the element. But not the curve, the group. The only difference is that this group is holding the curve, right? I'm going to repeat this step again so that if it's a little bit unclear, don't worry. Now we're going to delete that constraint because we don't need it anymore. We only use the constraint to place the curve with the proper rotation and in the proper position. And we call this hip_control. And the group, this is very important. Naming convention is super important. It's going to be hip control group. Now we can grab the hip control, and you never modify this, guys. You don't want to scale it, you don't want to rotate, you want to keep it exactly as it is so that you don't get into any problems. But we can go to the control vertices, for instance, and we can make this thing a little bit bigger, like this. So this curve right here, you can even change the shape if you want. Like for instance, since this character has a sort of like roundish shape, we can move it all the way like this, so it like fully controls the element. And as you can see, the pivot point of this curve is still on the hips, and it's still with the proper orientation. Now we grab the curve and we grab the hip bone, this one right here, and we're going to do a constraint, parent constraint. It doesn't really matter if we have maintain offset on or off because the group is exactly on the same point, so it doesn't change the things. And now if I grab this guy and I move it around, I'm going to move around the whole character and I'm going to rotate around the whole character, okay? Now, this group right here, we're going to parent it to the main curve so that if we move the main curve, everything else follows. It's a chain of events that we're doing. So we nest things inside of each other. And as you can see, we're going to have three things here. We're going to have the geometry, we're going to have the joints, and then we're going to have the controllers. The way the controllers are connected to the whole rig is through constraints. And this is why one of the reasons why we can't export this to other softwares, because the constraints inside of Maya only work inside of Maya. If we export this into Blender or into Unreal, the rig, the controllers break. The skin and the joints remain, but everything else breaks, and we need to rebuild it pretty much. So there we go. That's it. Now let's do an easy one. Let's do, for instance, the eyes. Let's say we want to do the controllers for the eyes. Well, we can create another curve, right? Like this. We don't move it. We don't rotate it. We immediately after we create it, we group it. We call this eye underscore control. And this is going to be eye underscore control group. In this case, of course, this is going to be left eye underscore control. And this is going to be left eye underscore control group. We select the eye joint, we select the group, and we do a constraint, parent constraint. As you can see, the controller has jumped all the way to that section right there. And once that controller is there, we can delete the constraint. We don't need it anymore. And we can position this curve in a place that's a little bit easier with the control vertices. Remember, we don't move the curve, we move the control vertices, so the pivot point remains exactly the same. So I'm going to move it right here. I'm going to press E and click to turn on discrete rotate, and I'm going to rotate this at 90 degrees like this. So now, if I just select object, you can see that the pivot point is right there. So I just select this guy to get a quick access to the eye, and now I can animate the eye, or that's how I'm going to be animating it. One thing that I'm going to do here is I want to have this exact same curve on the other side. How can we do that? Well, we're going to mirror it, but we're going to mirror it the old-fashioned way. I'm going to grab this group right here. I'm going to press Control G to group it, and the new group is going to be on the floor. I'm going to Control D to duplicate that group, and I'm going to set this group to -1 on X. And as you can see, it's going to be right here. This is important because this mirrors the behavior in the similar way as what we saw yesterday or in the last video, where things were moving in a slightly different way. So now that we have that, we don't need the groups anymore. We just Shift P, get this out of there. This, of course, is going to be called the right eye. The right eye control, and this is going to be the right eye control, like that. Same for this one, we get this Shift P out of the group. We don't need these groups anymore, and there we go. Finally, we grab the curve, we grab the eye, and we do a constraint. In this case, we're just going to do an orient constraint. Why an orient constraint? Because we don't want to move the eye, unless you want to go like super cartoony. We just want to be able to rotate this thing, and depending on how we rotate this thing, we're going to be rotating the eye. Same thing over here, we grab this guy right here, we grab the eye, and we do a constraint, orient constraint, because again, we only want to rotate the eye. This is one way to do it for characters. There's other ways like aim constraints and stuff like that, but for this character, I think this is perfectly fine, because we're only going to probably like be moving it up and down. Let's go to the jaw. The jaw is another one of those elements. Now, these groups, we're going to leave them right here for now, because we're going to parent them later on to something, to a different group. So for the jaw, same deal, we create a new curve, we group it, and we're going to call this group as C, as in center, jaw, control. Or if you want to, actually, I think it's just going to keep things simpler, just call it jaw control. And of course, this is going to be jaw control underscore a group. Now, we grab the jaw, which is this one right here, parent or driver, driven, constraint, parent constraint. This is where things are going to get fancy. I'm gonna turn off the visibility of this guy. There we go. You can see that now the jaw curve is not aligned like to the center or anything. It's aligned in a different way. And this is important because, again, we are inheriting, when doing this parent constraint, we're inheriting the position and the rotation of the joint. And this will make sure that when we move things around, they are not like offsetting or anything. So now we don't need a constraint anymore. We just grab this guy. We go into the control vertices. It's a little bit tricky to select them sometimes, so just isolate it and select. There we go. And I can actually like scale this thing, and we can pretty much tweak it. Like if I scale this, for instance, we can make this like a sort of like a moon shape. I'm gonna press W, click, and I'm gonna change this to object mode so that it displaces or moves around in this sort of object mode fashion. So I'm gonna push it down a little bit, like this. Let me isolate it. I'm gonna grab this too, guys. I'm gonna press a V, which is soft selection. I'm gonna press V and middle mouse. As you can see, we can move this around, kind of like a jaw shape. Okay, again, you can shape and move your curves around as like whatever way you want. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really change because as you can see, the pivot points is still where it's supposed to be. Changing back to world here. And now if I rotate, I want this thing to rotate the jaw. So how do we connect that? Well, we select the curve, we select the joint, and we do a constraint, orient constraint. And this is what we're gonna have. So now by selecting the curve, which is at 0, very important that the curve is at 0, by selecting the curve and moving it around, we're gonna be able to move the whole character like this, okay? Now you can do this with whatever. You can use geometry, you can use like, I don't know, some sort of like text or whatever to do controllers, because at the end of the day, the constraint is what's doing the trick. But the standard for the industry right now are the curves. We use curves. Now, if you wanted to like drop the jaw, maybe when you kill the enemy, the jaw drops, then that means that we probably need another constraint, which would be a constraint point constraint. So now if I move this, we can also make the jaw fall out. If that's something that you want on your rig, feel free to add it. I'm gonna keep it just because, but normally I think rotation is the only thing that we're gonna use. Now, this is where, again, the position of the joint was very important because as you can see, where the joint is, that's the point at which the mandible is gonna be like moving and rotating around. So if you see that your rotation is wrong, that means that your position for the bone was wrong. And you're gonna have to go back. This is why a lot of people hate rigging because opposed to something like sculpting or modeling, it's not very easy to fix things. You need to follow the steps very, very closely. And if you mess up, you have to backtrack quite a bit, okay? So that would be the second curve. We have our main curve, we have two eyes curves, we have the jaw curve. Let's now go for the, what's the word? For the head curve, which is this one right here. We have the neck curve, by the way, as well, which we didn't really rig, to be honest. We should have done a little bit there, but we can always change weights later on, so don't worry. Let's eliminate the keyframes here. So I'm just gonna select all of these things. All these things. You don't want any animations on your bones when doing this. Break connections, and there we go. So for that one, we're gonna do another curve. We're gonna group it again, and we're gonna call this head control. And of course, this one right here is going to be the head control group. We select the bone, the group, not the curve, the group, and we do a constraint, parent constraint. This will make the curve jump all the way to the head, which is right there. And now we can delete the constraint. We don't need it anymore. We can grab the curve and we can play around with the shape. So let's select this guy. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Something like that. Actually want to kind of like scale this down like this. Doesn't really matter how you move this like vertices in these shapes because it's we're not gonna see it. There we go. That looks good. So this is gonna be my head control. Now that we have this, you can see the curve is clean. We grab this guy, we grab the head, and we do a constraint, parent constraint. So if we move the head, or if we rotate the head will move as well. Now we can start parenting things because since this thing has all the jaw and the eyes connected to the joint, we also want the groups, very important, the groups to be connected to the curve. Okay, here's where people mess up. They start connecting things where they're not supposed to go. In this case, the groups, we don't delete the groups, we don't get rid of them. They are going to be attached or parented, directly parented to the head control. So now, if the head control moves, all of the head is going to move as well. And I can still go to each individual part and move it around. So I can move the head, for instance, like this, and then I can move the jaw like this, okay? It's very important. So We got the head control is pretty much done. That's it. That's all we need to do. Now, for this back parts right here, for the legs and the tails right here, I'm going to show you a script that I got several years ago when I was taking my rigging classes. And it's a script called the FK chain. The FK chain, as the name implies, will allow us to create a chain of controllers and connections in an easy way. Because otherwise, if we wanted to move all of these points right here, which again, we probably don't want as much movement here, but if we wanted to move every single point right here, we will need to create a group, create a curve, parent it, delete the parent constraint, group it again, do the constraint to the bone. Like it's a mess, right? But there is a script. Let me see if I have it right here. No, I don't. Give me just 1 second. There we go. It's this script right here. Now, I'm not going to go and explain what this does. I'm just going to like very quickly go over it. It looks for a specific type of controller. If it doesn't find a specific type of controller, it will create a simple circle. And the way this works is actually quite fine or quite fun. Again, I did not create this rig. I don't remember where I got it, but I didn't create this rig. I'm not a programmer, but it helps automate the whole process. So if you grab all of these joints like a joint chain, and then you run this script on the Python tab down here, down here on this little box, you open the script editor, and you run this right here. What's going to happen is you are going to get, as you can see right here, a hierarchy of curves that are going to automatically be parented to each other, okay? And that control the bone the way you want. So this is super useful for arms, for fingers, for legs, for tails, anything that's just like a straight chain of bones. This is really good. So I'm going to show you how it works, and we're going to use it a couple of times. The way it works is fairly simple. You need to have the script, which by the way, it's going to be on the comments. I'm gonna include this on the comments. You just copy and paste this into your Python script editor right here. You select the joints in order, starting on the base. Like this is the abdomen A, abdomen B. Let's just make sure that we don't have any animation. No, okay. So abdomen A, abdomen B, C, D, tail, tail, tail. All of this. I'm skipping this one right now because it's not part of the, let's call it the main chain, right? And then you just select all of this elements right here. You just like highlight like this, and you click play, execute. And that creates all of the curves. Look at this. It creates all of the groups, abdomen A group, abdomen A control. It creates all of the curves right here. So I can select all of these guys. If I isolate them, they're going to be properly oriented, which is really important. They're going to be properly oriented, and they're going to be exactly where they are to be. The exact same thing we did with the head and the eyes and everything. It does that for us automatically. So it saves us a little bit of time. And another cool thing is that it keeps one of the inputs here so that we can actually change the radius to increase the size. So for instance, here, I can start increasing the size. Let's go to this one, which is the abdomen one. Let's go to a size 12. Or maybe more like a 14. There we go. And then this one, it's going to be a size 12. And then that's a size 10. That's perfect. And then this guy's should be smaller, right? Like you usually want to give the curves the amount of like importance that they have. So the less important the curve is, the smaller it should be, so that you don't confuse your animators. There we go. So now, and also one of the cool things about the script is that it automatically connects it to the joint. So if I grab all of this like chain and I rotate it, you can see it's already like connected. So it saves a lot of time. It's one of my favorite scripts to use when rigging because it saves quite a bit of time. The only problem is you can only use it on a straight chain. If you select chains that kind of like split or something, it doesn't work. But you can also select it on a single joint. So if I just want to create a controller on this joint, I just select the joint and run the script. And there we go. We have a little curve right there on the joint that's controlling the joint. Again, we just go here, change the radius, for instance. This one, I'll probably like rotate a little bit, but it's fine. It's just the little tail right there. So now we have all of the elements. I do think this one, again, to not confuse my animators or whoever's going to animate, I know I'm going to animate it, but if I were to give this to someone, I would change the shape a little bit. So probably something like this, like an oval shape. Same for this one, so that people know that those shapes are not part of the main, like a tail. They're part of like the appendages. They can, of course, tell that by the name of the thing, but it's always useful to be extra careful there. So something like that. So I know that this curve right there modifies the little tip of the tail. Now, let's make this even faster. What you can do here is you can just literally middle mouse and drag this into your shelf, and you're going to create a little like shortcut of the script. So now, let's say I want to create like for this chain right here. So 1, 2, and 3. Again, just hit the little icon right there, and you're going to see that the curves are right there. So we can grab that curve right there. Right, that curve right there. Well, hide this. So that curve, and that curve. And we go again to the radius. And we can start playing with the radius. So that one's going to be a quite big radius, something like that. And then the next ones are going to be smaller. I mean, this one's, to be honest, I shouldn't have kept them. Because when you have a curve, animators are going to try to animate the curve. And it's just like so small, like such a small little thingy there. I don't think it's really worth it. Now, one thing that I do need to mention here is that we are doing this in something called a forward kinematic, like a rigging process. Forward kinematic means that every single like joint will have its controller instead of using something called inverse kinematic. We are going to use inverse kinematic, but I don't want to use it everywhere. I just want to use it on the front legs. This back legs, since they're not as important, or I mean, they're important, but not as important, I'm going to keep them like this. Technically, there is a way to do a switch, to do FK switch, IK switch. We do that on the rigging course, but it's a lot more complicated that I can cover in like a 30 or 40 minutes. So this one, let's do, I'm just going to keep like easy numbers to remember. And the reason is we're going to have to do this on the other side. We can't mirror these curves because these curves have been, they have been mirrored in a specific way. So I need to go to this guy right here. Select the 3 joints again and hit the controllers again. So I know this one. The scale is going to be 6.5. This is mainly for like vanity purposes. Just want things to look as nice as possible. 6.5. This is a 3. And this is a 1.5. There we go. This is one of the like slow things about this whole thing, that you need to do this like per element. One important thing though, if we select the joints, you're gonna see that we are only doing like this array only works for translate and rotate. Okay, so it only translates and rotates the elements. It does not scale them, which is what we're gonna need on this guys right here. We're gonna need the scale. So even though we can use the script, we're gonna have to do something slightly different there to fix that part, which is the scale part of things. So I'm just gonna very quickly do this. So just 1, 2, 3. Run the script. 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 There we go. Let's hide the character. And you can see we have all of our curves. Hey. Did I mess up? Ah. My bad. I turn on the local rotation axis. I was clicking the wrong button. You probably saw that. Let's go quickly there. Let's turn it off. There we go. So again, you cannot do this on multiple chains. This script only works per chain. You have to do them one by one. So script 1, 2, 3 script 1, 2, 3 script. There we go. So now we can grab, for instance, all of the top level ones. Go here and change this to 6.5. And then grab all of the middle ones. Go here. And change this to 3. Finally, go to this ones. And change them to 1.5. There we go. So, we got all of our curves there. It's getting a little bit noisy, but we're going to clean it up a little bit with colors to make it easier for our animators to find the curves that they want. But now we need to talk about the final one, which is this guy right here. So for this guy, we're going to be using a slightly different process, which is called an IK handle. Usually, especially arms, you don't want to like move the arm and then move the elbow and then move the wrist and then all of the fingers. You use something called inverse kinematic, which is you move the wrist, and wherever you move the wrist, the rest of the element follows. So in our case, this is the wrist, right? This is the base. This will be like the shoulder, elbow, wrist, and then this is like the claw that we can move at the end. So what I want to do is I want to be able to move this guy, and when I move this guy, everything else follows. To do that, I'm going to select this guy right here. We're actually going to go to skeleton. I'm going to create something called an IK handle. The IK handle is going to go from here to here. And now, as you can see, we get this. If we select this guy right here and we move it around, you can see that now where this thing follows, the rest of the arm is going to try to follow. Let me get Thor out because he wants to go. Give me just 1 second. There we go, we're recording, perfect. So some people prefer IK handles, some people prefer just like traditional FK chains. In my case, I do like FK handles for this sort of thing. I think it looks quite nice and gives me a nice way to control things. And we can move this thing, and then we can still like modify the position of this guy right here, okay? So we can like move it and position it around. So the IK handle is there, it's done. The one thing that we need is we need a controller that can move that IK handle. So we're gonna have to select this joint right here, but we do not want to use our script because if we use our script, we're gonna break it. So we're gonna do it normally. We're gonna go again to curves, create a curve, group that curve, select the joint where we're gonna go, which is that one, select the group, do a constraint, parent constraint, delete the constraint, and this is going to be my IK, or it's going to be the right IK arm, or right arm IK control. And this is going to be the right arm IK control group. Now, we can select that guy right there. It's isolated. Let's make it bigger. Rotate it a little bit so it's, again, easier to select. Like that, perfect. And there we go. Now, before we connect this to the arm, I want to have the exact same curve on the other side. So Control G, Control D, -1 on X. It's going to jump to the other side. There we go. And then we just change the names here. We're going to call this L. And we're going to call this L. I know that the names are being hidden by my camera right now. I'm sorry. You're going to have to believe me. Shift P. And there we go. I wish I could like move the hypershade or the outliner out up, but it's a little bit difficult. I'm gonna move the groups up, but I don't want to like parent them to anything just yet. There we go. So that's the name of the groups. Left arm IK control and left arm IK control. Now we do have one thing called the IK handle right here. You do not want to get that into any group just yet. I'll explain why in just a second. Now we grab this guy right here, or actually we grab the IK handle, and the IK handle is gonna go parented to the IK control. So where the IK control goes, the IK handle will follow. Okay, that's the way we rig the IK handle. Very simple way to rig the IK handle. Now for this one, we can actually use our script again. So let's just go to rigging and just our script very quickly. That's going to give us a new curve. Of course, that curve we can modify the radius. Yep, 10 seems fine. And this one is going to allow us to move the claw around if we need to, and rotate it as well if we need to. Okay, so with this, we control oh yeah, of course, this right group that we have right here, we need to parent it to the curve as well. So the curve, the right arm IK controller curve will have the IK handle and the group of the claw. So now if I move this thing, the claw is going to follow along, and then we can still play around with the claw like this. Okay, that's the way to do it. I'll repeat it on this side. So we need to create the IK controller. Well, we need to create a curve for this one with the script. This is going to be 10 radius. The claw group will be parented to this curve right here. So P, you can see the IK control group, the IK control, the claw group. There we go. And then we go to skeleton and we create a IK handle going from here to here. And that new IK handle, which is called IK handle 2, is parented to the claw control. So if we select this guy again, we're going to move the whole thing. And then we're going to have access to the movement over here as well. Wait. This is not. Something broke here. What broke here? Oh yeah, the IK control is here. There we go. It's IK curve, IK handle and group. There we go. Now if we move this, it moves by itself, and if we move this, it moves the whole thing. Perfect. Cool. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So we have the controls for the arms, we have the controls for the whole abdomen, we have the controls for the hip. I think we're just missing this guy right here, which is the chest control, which of course is gonna give us something there, and the neck control, right? So since that's a chain, we can grab this guy and that guy and just use our controller or a script. Let's hide this guy, grab these two curves, make them bigger. There we go. Probably need to scale them a little bit and make them bigger again. So this ones I'm just gonna like guesstimate. Just gonna make them a little bit longer, thinner. Probably like there. If you need to move them as well, that works. Like as long as it's easy for the animator to select, that's what you should be going for. There we go. So that's the neck. And now we just need the chest. Go. And let's just scale this, make it bigger, rotate it, move it around a little bit if needed, just so, again, so that's easy to select. Here, one thing we can do is we can turn off the bones, so it's not as cluttering as everything else. There we go. And that's it. As you can see, we have pretty much everything connected. Now we can start merging some elements here. So let's collapse all of the groups and let's start seeing how we're gonna connect everything. So we know that hip control is the controller of everything else, right? Like this is the joint that controls everything. So the chain that starts on the chest, which is this, or the abdomen, that one, that group, the group of the abdomen should be parented to the hip control. Same for the group of the chest. So the group of the chest should be parented to the hip control. So where the hip control moves, the chest and everything else should follow, which as you can see right there, it does. Then the head control should be parented to the neck control. Okay, so the head control group will be parented to the neck control group. And again, where the what's the word? Where the neck goes, if the neck moves, the head should move as well. I think that should be fairly obvious, right? Now, both arm control groups, these two control groups that are following, should be parented to the curve of the chest, which is this one right here. We hit P. So again, if this moves, the arms are going to move as well. Okay. What else do we have here? The poison tail group should be probably grouped to this curve right here, which is the closest one. This leg controllers, like this two leg C controllers, I am going to connect them to this curve right here. The leg B controllers are going to be connected to this curve right here. And the leg A controllers are going to be connected to this curve right here. And there you go. As you can see, little by little, we are creating the whole hierarchy for our character. So now if I grab the main curve, everything should move. If you do this and everything moves, then that means we're going on a good direction. And of course, you should still be able to go to each individual curve, like this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, select them, and if you move them, all of the things should move. So it's a very simple forward kinematic controller, with the exception of the arm controllers here that have a little bit of IK control, but everything else is just a traditional FK control. Finally, the only final thing we need to do a group for this one, right? Which is gonna move the whole thing, and we need to do a group for the puffy effect that we want to add. So for this one, I'm just going to use the script. We're going to get the back control. There we go. As you can see, the orientation of this back control is a little bit different. That's fine. I'm going to make it really big. I'm going to rotate it. And what we can actually do here, for instance, we can grab this point right here, and we can sort of give it the shape of the thing. Again, this is mainly for visual purposes, so that when the animators take a look at the curves, then you know that, oh, this is the carapace curve, right? This is already connected there, so if I move this around, or if I like do this, which again, we can do some sort of exaggeration and stuff, it's already connecting and moving properly. Now this, where should it be connected? To the hips, of course. So we grab the group, we grab the hip control, this guy right here, we hit P, so that when the hip moves, everything else moves. Finally, we need to do the puffy effect on this guys right here. And I'm really lazy. I'm a really lazy person for in a good way, because I don't like to complicate things when I don't have to. Here's where scripting can come into place, because as you can see, we have this script right here. And you can see that when we are doing the whole thing, the most important part is this thing right here, which says parent constraint. Okay, well, actually down here, where it says point constraint. So when we run the script, it does a lot of things. It finds a controller, it places on the point, it deletes the constraint, blah, 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 blah. It creates the chain and everything. But what I mainly want this thing to do is I want to be able to control the point constraint, the orient constraint, and in this particular case, also the scale constraint. So to do that, I'm literally just going to grab this line here. You're going to have to do this on your own, because the code that I'm going to give you is without this line. And instead of calling this orient constraint, I'm just going to call it scale constraint, which is the command to do a scale constraint. So if my idea is gonna work, my idea should be working properly, but let's just give that a go. Let's grab this whole thing and just run it. And if we take a look at the curves that we have right here, if I scale this, there we go. The scale is working. So the scale on the curves is working. And we can also, by the way, for animation purposes, we can move this around. We can rotate this around, and we can scale it. So it's doing the 3 connections. We normally don't need all of those connections for everything, but for this particular ones, we do need it. So I'm just gonna hide the character real quick. And let me create the connections here quickly. Well, remember, 1 chain at a time. So first chain, script, second chain, script, third chain, script. That's why a lot of riggers are actually called technical artists, because they need to know a lot about this, like automatization processes to this. Because imagine we have a game and we have 50 different minions. You don't want to do this for every 50 minions, like curve by curve. So you start creating tools and options like this one to make the whole process a lot faster. Now here I'm gonna grab the base elements, the base curves. We don't need the script anymore. Let's go to the options. There we go. We probably want to move them a little bit, because as you can see, it's going to be a little bit difficult. Or let's try it like a 12. Is that better? Yeah, that's a little bit better. It's a little bit big for my taste, but it should work fine. Like this first one's, that's fine at 12. This guy's, I think we can go to 10 or maybe like 8. No, 10. 10. And this final one's can go to like an 8. There we go. Let's hide this again. Let's go for the next ones. This is one of the other things I love about the script, is the fact that you don't lose like the history of the curve, because it's created when you create the curve. So it makes for very easy modification. There we go. Let's do 6. And finally, this guy's right there. A little bit smaller, just to make it easy for the animator to know what they're going for. Now all of the groups here, all of these groups and this group right here will be parented to what curve? To this curve. So when this curve moves, everything else will follow. Okay, and that's it. As you can see, now we have the root controller, the bone controllers, and the geometry. We can Control G all of this guys and just call this fogling underscore rig, and that's our clean scene. Of course, when you see this, like, you go, I'm not doing it. Like, there's no way I'm gonna be able to learn that or to do that. But hopefully after these 3 videos, it should be a little bit less intimidating. That's why I created the course that I've been mentioning so much. That's one of the courses I'm most proud of, because some of the reviews that we've gotten is that people are now unafraid of rigging. They understand the concepts and they feel more confident trying to tackle some more complex stuff. So if you are on the fence about learning rigging, I do think if you're going to be a character or a creature modeler, it's really, really useful. Not because you're going to be a rigger, but because you understand things. And when you model things, like when we were doing this character on the sculpting phase, you know what things are going to work, how things are going to work or not. And that makes you, or allows you to make some decisions that are a little bit better for the overall process. Now, finally, to give it another pass here, every single curve, if we press Ctrl A, if we go to the shape, we have this thing called the object display. And there is one thing that we can do here, the drawing overrides. We can enable an override and we can change the color. So this curve right here, I am gonna go to RGB and this is gonna be like a yellow curve because it's the most important ones. So this guy right here and this guy right here, which is the hip and the carapace controllers, we're also gonna enable overrides, change this to RGB. And this are going to be, let's say, pink. Same for this one. Enable overrides, RGB, pink. There we go. This guy's right here, for instance. It's a shame. I think you can't do this on both of them. You should be able to, but it seems like you can't. So yeah, let's just make this a blue, for instance. And this is one of the ways in which you can clean up your stuff. I'm not going to bore you with the whole process. I'm just going to give a color to all of them. And that's it, guys. We're pretty much ready to start animating. So I can't promise that we're going to be doing a lot of animations because I still want to cover some things inside of Unreal. So I'm just going to do an idle animation and we're going to do the puffing animation for the character. And we'll see that running inside of Unreal. Sounds good? Let me know in the comments if you think that's a good idea, because a walk cycle is definitely going to be more complex with this guy. But yeah. That's pretty much it for this one, guys. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you back on the next one. Bye-bye.